Hi, Senator Mark Warner again, giving you an update from the equivalent of day 4 for me, day 3 of the House Manager's presentation on impeachment. I thought I'd do something a little bit different today and on this Facebook Live presentation, read some questions from Virginians that we solicited last night. I'll try to be fairly brief on my answers. If you've got additional questions, please submit them and we'll try to get back, if not in this kind of presentation, another time to answer all your questions. Let me get right at it since we've only got 15 minutes during this break time. Chris from Newport News asks, are you open to voting against the impeachment if the case isn't strong? What parts of the case are you still waiting for evidence to better support? Well, Chris, of course, I'm open to voting against impeachment if I don't feel like the House managers have met the legal threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors that is laid out in the Constitution. In terms of parts of the case you're still waiting for to get more evidence, the House managers, 2.5 days, spent most of their time working on the charges around abuse of power. They've not yet made the case around obstruction of Congress, so I want to see more evidence there. On the first part of their case, though, there were so many facts, there was so much of an outline that the president restricted military aid to our ally Ukraine and restricted a White House meeting because he wanted, not for our country's interest, but he wanted for his personal political interest to get dirt on the Bidens, or he wanted to promote this frankly crazy theory that somehow it was Ukraine, not Russia, that intervened in 2016. Now, I'm going to wait to see what the president's lawyers will say about that. Are they going to try to rebut the facts, or are they going to simply say, well, the president did that, but that doesn't rise to a level of violation? We'll see in the coming days. But I think on the first article, that they have made a pretty strong case. On the second article, I'm still waiting. Next question, it comes from David from Richmond, when he asks, what specific law is cited as being violated in the articles of impeachment? Now, I think the president's lawyers will make a great deal of this issue because in the charging documents, both obstruction of Congress and abuse of power, they didn't name a specific law. Now, I quickly point out when the Constitution was written, there were no American set of laws. This was before we'd passed national laws. And what they ended up using was the term high crimes and misdemeanors. That has a historical context. I actually do believe that abuse of power would fall into that category. I think there's a number of constitutional scholars who said you don't need a specific crime. Matter of fact, one of the president's lawyers, Alan Dershowitz, back in the late 90s, when he was maybe arguing a slightly different approach, said you didn't need a specific crime. I think if you, particularly on the issue of abuse of power and abuse of the Constitution, that would qualify, in my mind, within that high crimes and misdemeanor. I'm not saying we've reached that threshold yet. I still want to hear from the president's lawyers. Still want to get our questions answered. Frankly, would still like to see additional witnesses. I can't understand why those people closest to the president, who still work for the president, like his chief of staff, if they have evidence that would clear the president, why they won't come in and take an oath, swear, and then give that evidence. My fear is, and I think maybe the reason they're not going to testify, or maybe the president's lawyers' fear, is that they would not be able to prop up the president, but they might actually simply add additional evidence to what the House has already brought. Let me go to another question. Anita from Woodbridge is asking, is there a constitutional restriction on the Chief Justice taking a more active role? Anita, I'm not sure there's any constitutional restriction. I think since we've only done this 3 times, there's not a lot of precedence here. My understanding is Chief Rehnquist, who oversaw the trial in 1999 of Bill Clinton, basically said he was very proud of what he did, and I'm paraphrasing, but he didn't do much. So I think that's kind of the approach that Chief Justice Roberts is taking. I will say this, that some of us said if there were questions about witnesses or documents about what would be relevant or not, I supported an amendment that would have given that power to the Chief Justice. I think the vast majority of us would trust the Chief Justice I don't always agree with him. He was appointed by a Republican, but I think during his tenure as Chief Justice, he's shown he will adhere to the rule of law. I wish we would have passed that amendment, but I think unless something radical changes, the Chief Justice is going to still probably take a fairly restrained position going forward. A couple more questions. Megan from Hampton asks, what conversations are you having with your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and how are they perceiving these proceedings? You know, I've got a lot of Republican friends, senator friends. I'm proud of the fact, particularly on my Intelligence Committee, that we're the last fully functioning bipartisan committee. I have had a number of conversations with my Republican colleagues. I think they're uneasy by a lot of the things that are being said. I think particularly Adam Schiff's presentation last night and his presentation again this afternoon, where he basically says, does anybody, Democrat or Republican, not believe that the president wouldn't ask for personal favors or wouldn't potentially attack anyone the way he's trying to now attack the Bidens, that frankly, he's equal opportunity attacker. I think he's attacked a lot of Republican senators who are sitting in this proceeding. So I think they're wrestling with this. I think they want to try to give, obviously, most of them supporters of the president. They want to hear what the president's lawyers have to say. But some of the questions that Mr. Schiff has posed last night and again today, I saw and felt a lot of my Republican colleagues made them uneasy. Now, let me get to another question. Randy from Minetta asks, since it's obvious that all will vote party line, why even have this fiasco? Well, Randy, I hope we can't jump to that conclusion. As I've said from the outset, I took an oath to be impartial. I want to hear what the president's lawyers have to say. I want to get my questions answered. I candidly want to hear what arguments why we wouldn't want to hear from the president's closest advisors, or why we wouldn't want to have those additional witnesses or have those additional documents, particularly why would we have a trial where we wouldn't have all the appropriate evidence? But I don't think that we're going to end up necessarily with a party line vote. I hope not. And fiasco, I guess, Randy, what I would hope is that you would, if you're not able to take the time now, that you would at least take a few hours and look at the House presentation of at least the evidence around abuse of power. I'd follow this. I hadn't followed it as closely and seen this in a linear fashion. Lots of evidence from people who Mr. Trump appointed, lots of evidence from career civil servants, all who potentially put their jobs in jeopardy by coming forward because they were, uncomfortable or thought it was illegal. The president basically, saying he was going to withhold military aid or withhold a White House meeting to the Ukrainian president unless the Ukrainian president put forward these political investigations against the Bidens and against, again, this theory that somehow it was Ukraine, not Russia, that intervened in 2016. I know we got to close up, but I would say, particularly on that last point, there's no one in the American intelligence community, there's no one, frankly, that Mr. Trump has appointed in intelligence or law enforcement. I don't even think there's anybody, any of my colleagues, Republican colleagues on the Senate Intelligence Committee, that think there's any basis in this wacky theory that somehow it was Ukraine, not Russia, that intervened in 2016. Matter of fact, that whole theory was hacked by Russian intelligence services, and the fact that this president continues to advance it, frankly, plays to the advantage of Vladimir Putin. So I hope you'll take a look at some of the testimony, or take a look at some of these proceedings, and honestly listen again probably to the president's lawyers as well. I don't think this is a fiasco. I think it's our constitutional responsibility to take these serious charges under consideration. That's what I'm doing. That's what I hope my colleagues will do. And I'll try to keep my constituents and folks around the country informed on a daily basis of what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And let's stay tuned for another few long days. Thanks, everybody, so much.